Welcome to Enrichment Today podcast, hosted by Dr. Amy Christine Blansit. This podcast covers topics to build stability and find tranquility in your life. Join us to discuss topics to improve your financial health, change your limiting beliefs, improve your wellness, and so much more, all to increase your self-sufficiency. If you like this podcast, make sure to follow the Enrichment Today podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and follow the Drew Lewis Foundation on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. You can also check us out on our websites, enrichmenttoday.org and drewlewis.org. Now sit back, relax, and learn to break some crayons with us.
Hello and welcome to our podcast, Enrichment Today. I'm so excited to join everyone and talk about this new idea. I've wanted to do a podcast forever. I kept putting it off. And finally, now is the time. I'm Dr. Amy Blansit. I am a professor at Missouri State. I'm the CEO of the Drew Lewis Foundation. I also dabble in real estate and have a side job with a makeup company called Soleil Jolie. So I stay busy, proud mom of 2 kiddos. I don't like downtime very much. I'm really excited to have Holly with me here today. Holly, why don't you share who you are?
Who am I? Well, I am, first and foremost, I always introduce myself as the mom of 2, and I know I'm more than that, but that's like my greatest accomplishment. I'm also a financial advisor, recovering.
I say yes, recovering. Dang it, I stole your thunder already.
I am a recovering financial advisor because I've shifted my focus and I'm not the traditional route anymore. I kind of do things a little differently, which led me to this fabulous relationship with the Drew Lewis Foundation and talking to the members that are over here. I also, because that's not enough, I teach fitness on the side over at a studio here in town, fitness and yoga. And then I have private clients that I deal with. I have 2 dogs that are my little babies now that my human babies are not here anymore. And kind of like Amy, I don't like a still and quiet house, so I stay very busy to try to find things to be productive and do.
Right. I also have a dog, so we have that in common. Yeah. You'll learn more about us. Some tragic things that brought us together is, and one thing we don't use in our introduction, is that we are both also widows. I hate checking that box, but it's going to be a part of our story, and so I thought I'd just throw that out in front so that it's not abrasive when we add it later, and probably cry a little bit here and there. It might happen. Also, some of my favorite things, we mentioned not liking the whole quietness, so yeah. I love chaos and I love managing chaos, so if you've got chaos in your life, come find me. Only though if you're ready for it to be fixed. That's also why I love DIY projects, so I walk into a house and I see all the corners that aren't cut quite right and they need caulk or completely redone. My brain just doesn't shut off in that way. But that's also why the Drew Lewis Foundation, which we'll talk about in a minute and what that is, it's why it exists, and it's why this building that we're in exists. So that's a bit about me. Love managing chaos.
Well, I'm pretty good at creating it, so that's helpful. I do have some corners in my house that are not square, so if I could have your help,
yes,
I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll show you how to use caulk. You want to pronounce that one correctly.
Caulk. Sounds very British.
Yes. Sometimes Holly might also break out in a British accent.
Yeah, British, Italian. I try an Australian, not so good.
Yeah.
Crikey, but
crikey. So we're going to talk about how managing chaos is, like I said, what brought us to where we are today. And we've mentioned the Drew Lewis Foundation a couple of times, so I want to share about what that is. I'm going to tell a brief story of it, and we'll get into some of that later, but really the Drew Lewis Foundation is an organization, it's a nonprofit that focuses on engaging, support, and transforming individuals and our community. We engage with individuals who are low income or individuals who are living paycheck to paycheck, sometimes called the working poor and many other terms that we use. But it's individuals, it's our neighbors, it's a person sitting in the church pew next to you who just maybe doesn't know how to struggle, or they're struggling and don't know how to manage money perfectly. Maybe they don't have the ideal job. And then we really work to build support for those individuals to have the foundation to move forward, the support they need from community and community members, and the support and direction they might need to get additional education or sometimes advocate for themselves in the job they have in order to get the raise they deserve or the position they want. And then finally, through that, we work on transforming the community around them and the individuals as well. So it's powerful. It's the favorite thing that I do. And I'm also really lucky where Missouri State has been a partner in making that happen, Drury University as well, and over 20 community partners that have really come together to change how we're managing individuals in our community. It's powerful work, and I'm really lucky to do it. And Holly has joined us as well, and she has this financial background, so we're really excited to have some of the ideas that she's going to share. You got a couple on the cuff, or am I putting you on the spot?
Nope.
All right.
So I started a little company called Your Financial Buddy because the part of the finance world I came from was really overlooking a piece of the world that needed education and help and mentoring. A lot of times people felt like they just weren't heard. Maybe they felt like they weren't sophisticated enough to seek out financial guidance. So I work with people that have a very limited mindset, and maybe they're stuck in believing that they are not good enough, that they have limited resources, so that means their whole life has to be limited, and they live in this very small mindset financially. So we're working to rewire the mind and the thought process and the words that go around in the head. So you have these recordings all the time, like, I can't afford that, or that's not something that my family has ever been able to do. I will never be able to do that. I will never own a house. I will never own a car. Those just aren't things that are going to happen for me. I will never have a good job. So these recordings have to be changed. And we start the same way you eat an elephant, one bite at a time, one step at a time, right? One little thought. But that's the primary focus of my work with the folks over at Drew Lewis. And it is the happiest work I have ever been able to be a part of. I love it.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you and many other professionals like that who are giving their time and their expertise to just, again, the sense of community. You were talking about that mindset, and I struggled with that mindset many different times in life. And part of why we're here in this building and here in Grant Beach is as a young female who was buying her first home on her own, the only place that I could afford a house, and this is 2007 when prices were insane, was in what I later learned was like a low-income neighborhood. I drove in this neighborhood and saw the charm in the trees and this beautiful old home that I got to save, and I've learned so much about this neighborhood sense. I moved in and there was this amazing sense of community. The neighborhood association brought me light bulbs. I mean, it was awesome. I sat on my front porch and I knew my neighbors, and I moved away from this neighborhood, and I realized the whole time I've been fighting to find that sense of community again. So the idea of community, financial health, all those things are going to be topics that we're going to have in our podcast as we progress. So I really like to think the spotlight of this podcast is building stability, whether it's through financial health, self-empowerment, and really then the ultimate goal is that quality of life and the sense of tranquility. So we have some stability to lead to some tranquility, and Holly and I were prepping before this, and she said she's really working on that tranquility piece.
Yeah, I am. You were talking about the community, and that's something that I am going to bring back to when I lost my husband. I didn't have, my mom still lived here, but then she passed away shortly after. And my dad had been gone for years, so I thought about leaving Springfield. But the thing that kept me here was I had 2 little kids, and it was a place of community support. And even though we didn't have blood relations here, it was my chosen family. So we stayed here, and Springfield has been our community that just kind of came around us and supported us and helped us. And my girls grew up with a lot of chosen family. Our neighborhood was just that kind of place, and I'm really grateful for that. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes you get to that point where you're a little tired of where you live and you're not sure you want to stay here, and then you go to the grocery and you run into your daughter's 8th grade teacher, or she's running down the street and you lean out the window and they see you and they blow you a kiss. It's an amazing community.
Yeah.
And that's why we stayed here, and that's why I love being a part of it. And I love that I get to bring the Drew Lewis members into my community now, because it's a whole new group of people that I just have grown to fall in love with. So
yeah. And that's really one of the things about Drew Lewis Foundation that might be different from many other organizations. And it makes it difficult for staff as we try to figure out boundaries. But
tiny interruption. My phone went off because one of my children texted me. But as an only parent, as you know,
they get priority.
You're their only contact. And so whether it's happy, sad, or they need you, they got to reach you. So little interruption there.
Little pause. So we'll see mindset if we can get back to where we were. Community, whatever. I don't know. We'll change the subject. That'll be easy. So we were talking about the spotlight and what we want to focus on, the stability, creating stability to enjoy the tranquility. We were talking about sense of community. And then I also want to bring up, this idea of breaking crayons. So you're going to see our slogan is about breaking crayons. So one of the things in a story that I had told, which kind of came up with this term, is when I was in the first grade, Mrs. Drake had, I'm last name B, so I'm sitting up front, and Mrs. Drake had, walking the aisles, came by and saw that I was doing a good job coloring in the first grade. Go me. And so she picks up my piece of paper and is showing the class how I have pressed perfectly. I'm in the lines, and she uses it as the example because I guess all my other classmates were breaking their crayons. I don't know. I guess it was a first grade problem. All the crayons were broken. But mine was not. My picture was perfect. And so she uses me as the example. And then I'm super excited about it. And so I'm coloring away. And of course, I break my freaking crayon. And I'm up front. So I'm like, oh God, everyone's going to know that I fail. And I was just told I was perfect. So, kid you not, put my crayon on my little desk and flicked it.
I can see this.
Yeah, right. And of course, no one saw it. So I act all upset that my crayon has tragically fallen to the floor and broken. And of course, then I'm getting feedback of oh, so sorry. And I realized it worked. And I got away with it. And so the joke was always all right, so how many crayons am I breaking and covering up in life? And then to go from that idea of being a female, being a single mom, being a widow, being watched by a community, starting a company. I got my doctorate in my 30s. So just all of these things that I'm always thinking people are watching me and I'm going to fail. Who really gives crap about my life, right? They have their own life. But we all live that fear of being seen in our moments of failure. And so in this podcast, we want to talk about, we've all broken a lot of crayons. Mm-hmm. And how powerful would it be if we just admitted it and we just moved on? And instead of seeing it as part of failure, I learned a lot from that, or maybe not that crayon experience because it taught me to lie and get away with it. But as an adult in life, learning that those failures, or I also like to talk about vulnerability. There's that power in being vulnerable in a way that people see you as being a sense of community, as being approachable. You're a financial advisor, right? You have this amazing wealth and you're intimidating. You're beautiful. Everyone probably assumes you're worth millions.
I'll pay you later for that one.
But it can be, intimidating for people to feel that you're approachable. And so talking about those failures and realizing I might do a lot of stuff well, which is why I've gotten to where I've gotten, but I also didn't let a failure stop me. Right. And maybe that's the difference. So that someone listening and who's struggling with a failure they might have made might tune into something we have to share and realize okay, how can I retune my brain to say that was a good learning experience? Right. I'm going to present it as that. I'm going to think of it like that, and find ways to make that empowering instead of debilitating.
Mm-hmm. There's so many times, and I know this is a catchphrase, but imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You feel like I don't belong here. I don't know what I'm doing. And so the way that I've had to work through that, because just recently I was struggling with that, is you have to get still. And this is where my yoga training comes into play and has helped me. You have to be still. Those thoughts will continue in your head unless you shut them down, just like you turn off the TV.
Yeah.
And you focus on what is right in front of you, which is, breathing is a good way to do that. And then get real and understand what you know. It's legit, right? You really do know what you're talking about. And if you don't, but you have a passion for it, then go find a way to learn about it so that you can educate and do more with what it is you want to do. But, like Amy, she had the Fairbanks, right? And then she figured out how to create it and make it become a community center. And she talked to local financial people and, anybody that could help her create and bring this dream to fruition. So it wasn't, you didn't just sit there and freak out and then stop.
Well, I did, but
but you didn't stop.
But only for like a minute, and then
you didn't go total deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
But that's it. We all have these moments where we're like, holy bleep, we have no business doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then you realize there's a reason you're on this path and you have a serious passion for it.
Yeah.
And it is supposed to happen. And then you are supposed to be the one to bring it out there. So how do you do that? How do you find the next right step?
And we're going to talk about things like that on this podcast. Can't tell you all the answers today because then you wouldn't listen to the next podcast that we have. So speaking of some teasers about some upcoming topics, as I mentioned, Holly has amazing knowledge on financial stability. And you want to share, what is I can never remember the name, but the certification. So you've done extra education in order to help individuals in their mindset, because the financial decisions we make are obviously going to have to do with the experiences we have. Don't get me wrong, I love a little serotonin when I go into some TJ Maxx or, wherever it might be
Yeah. So I have a couple of the shiny designations, like Amy's talking about having her postdoctoral. Did I say that right?
You did. I barely even have people call me Dr. Amy Blansit. Doctor.
So I have this pain right here.
Yeah, wrong kind of doctor. Doctor of health sciences. It's not even a PhD or an MD, so I'm somewhere in the middle, so it's really confusing for people, but I like health science. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, credentials.
So the shiny part of what I have is I do have licensing, which is, all that means is that I am an investment advisor rep. So I am licensed to give investment advice. I also have what's called a chartered retirement plan specialist. I can talk with you. I earned it from the College for Financial Planning. So I have expert knowledge in creating retirement plans.
I need to get on that. Oh, for businesses?
Well, businesses and individuals.
Okay. Drew Lewis Foundation needs to get on that, and I need to get on it.
They're good. Everybody's good, I'm pretty sure.
Even if it's only like $500, everyone should start thinking long-term and retirement.
$25 a month, man.
Yeah.
Put it into, we can talk.
That's like multiple episodes.
Yeah,
I'm going to get super excited for those.
And that's probably when
when we're going to talk to like Acorn or other, in order to our amazing developed podcast to get some advertising and shout them out, because I do have to say I use those resources. I think we should get paid to talk about them.
I love Acorns.
Yeah.
But so those are my shiny things. Now the things that are not so shiny is because I became a widow and at the same time was a business owner, and I had to resolve all the problems that created because we had a business that was falling apart because we didn't have the right succession plan in place, because we didn't have a trust until the last minute. All these lessons that I learned, because you can look at them as failures or you can look at them as lessons, and I have to choose to look at them as lessons. So that's where the grit comes from. Yeah. I have the gritty part, just like you. You have the gritty part, right?
Yeah.
And it came with a little bit of sadness, and I hate that I had to learn it that way, but I learned it.
Yeah. Often when there's a bit of sadness or grief or all those other negative feelings that we think of, we learn the lesson probably a little bit more deeply, and we hold on to that lesson more deeply than if it was all bright and shiny, and sometimes we say, well, man, I got lucky. Yeah. And we forget about all the work that we put in. If you scratch your ticket, people, they get lucky. Mm-hmm. Most people who have done well, have completed degrees, or are successful, is because they did put the work in. Now, I won't say that things weren't aligned and there are components to put in place for sure, But very rarely does someone just wake up and luck slaps them in the face and they never have to do another thing in life. So yeah, we've got some grit.
Yeah, and I think, again, you have to find the lesson. It's too easy to beat yourself up and say, I failed, or somebody handed me this. There's always a lesson you can take to move forward with.
For sure, for sure. So yeah, we're going to talk about some financial stuff. We're going to talk about probably a little bit of women empowerment, but really if we're talking about women empowerment, fill in the blank, men. You can take off the woe part, and we're going to just be talking about empowerment in general. We also are going to be talking about sense of community. You mentioned the idea of the imposter syndrome, many other things that it takes just to feel like you are a whole, complete person, that you've got what it takes to build that stability so you get to make choice. That's amazing to have choice in life. Do I want to do this or that this weekend? Because I have the freedom financially to make those choices. Where do I want to take my kids for a trip? Because I've worked really hard to put not only my emergency savings away, but also vacation savings. So lots of fun stuff. A lot of it will come back to the financial concepts, but a lot of emotional and professional development as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fun. So I want to also then talk about how we got here and what here is. So we are going to be doing this podcast from a building you'll hear us talk about, the Fairbanks. The Drew Lewis Foundation owns the Fairbanks now, but when it was first acquired, Drew and I, Drew Lewis, purchased it together. It was a dilapidated building in Grant Beach neighborhood. As I'd mentioned, I had moved to Grant Beach in 2007 as a single female. It's the only place I could afford to live, and I'm so glad that I was brought to this neighborhood. I went to Drury University, so the north side wasn't so bad. Oh, I got to do a shout out. Anytime you say you went to a small private college, it's assumed that you're wealthy or grew up wealthy. I was the first of my siblings. I'm the sixth in order to go to college and graduate. A couple of them dabbled. They dabbled in college.
Yeah.
Neither of my parents did the traditional route through college. My mom went back to school when I was 4 or 5, so I went to preschool at College of the Ozarks. And that obviously shaped my life, seeing my mother complete that and realizing that it was the route to go. So I grew up low income. I was really lucky. No, I really put in the work and was able to put together a great financial package in order to go to Drury University with grades and scholarships and that sort. And so loved the north side, loved the historic homes, and was really happy to end up back here. So in 2007, when I had moved to this neighborhood, the school closed. So it'd been a neighborhood school. It's an amazing old school that was built in 1906. It had operated as the hub. I mean, it was like the heartbeat of this community for 100 years. And due to the age of the building and us wanting shiny and new and the technologies and things that are going into schools today, the building had just had functional obsolescence. It just really wasn't ideal for education. And so the school board elected to sell it, and the investors really wanted to tear it down because they wanted the 2 acres, and they could have done a lot more with the land. Thankfully, the market crashed and they weren't able to do it. Sorry for
Thankfully, the market crashed.
Thankfully, there was one positive to the market crashing, is that this building didn't get torn down. The rest of the country, not so good. So, right? It sat vacant for 6 years. There was drugs, there was prostitution, there was graffiti, the grass was overgrowing. It was actually the #1 service call in Springfield, meaning the neighbors cared, so there's still neighborhood engagement, and they were calling to complain. And every complaint cost the city money. Police or fire truck has to show up. There actually was a fire. The room we're sitting in, there was a fire. There was a big hole in the floor. And so sounds like the perfect kind of building to buy, right? There's a graffiti and a hole in the floor. Man, that sounds like a great community hub. Let's save it.
It's a DIY project.
Yes, it was 25,000 square feet of all the DIY I could imagine. And also a huge money pit. One of my favorite movies as a child, right? Shaped my entire life, probably. Thank you, Tom Hanks. So anyway, Drew and I purchased the property. He had actually been diagnosed with colon cancer. It was stage 4, and so he chose to do some radical treatments to remove tumors. And I'll be honest, I had fallen in love with the property. I talked about it so much that Drew loved me dearly, which means by proxy, he had fallen in love with the property and the idea. He was such a positive person that he saw the opportunity, and he was also in real estate, so he saw the potential value. So we purchased the property and closed on it in February, and then unfortunately he had a lot of complications and some immune system problems and passed March right after we had purchased it. So you talk about sense of community, to go from losing your spouse to his extended, so social capital. We're going to talk about that a lot. Drew had massive social capital, Mr. Personality. He knew everyone in Springfield, and everyone that he knew who saw this potential, they put their hands into this building. Whether it was an HVAC company or a painter or just people coming to pull the weeds, this project has been a sense of community with Drew's name all over it. Not literal name, but friends and family, everyone who's come to keep his name and his vision and those things alive. It's one of the first times I've made that through all that without crying. Must be you, Holly. Yeah.
I hear you.
So anyway, purchased the building. We renovated the first phase, which is about 3,500 square feet. Tiny little room that had been the add-on in the library. But what was amazing is we had a lot of people who were curious about what was going on. Unlike Drew, I am not the most social person, and I'm not going to go out and knock on doors and be like, hi, by the way, I'm the crazy person who bought the building down the street. You should know me. If Drew was alive, he would have been the one like knocking on doors. So there was a lot of like mysticism about who is this millionaire girl who's crazy enough to buy this old building that should have been torn down. All of those things wrong. So we did an open house. So I partnered with some other professors at Missouri State, and we were doing a lot of community engagement. Everyone brought their own lawn chair. And so we started having these meetings in the first part of the renovations. And we opened the doors. And so we had just kind of, again, set ourselves up for like the mindset of failure means no one shows up. Success means 10 people show up. Like, we're going to be so excited if just 10 people come in the doors to say, what are you guys doing? Because at this point, we already had the idea of sense of community, the community hub, and the community garden concept going. We had like 100 people show up. I mean, it was a rotating door. It was amazing. Everyone who had curiosity about it. We even had individuals who didn't live in the neighborhood who just knew that we were doing an open house show up. So we knew we had something, and we knew that this community was the right place to really continue to develop this idea of a community hub. So fast forward through to 2019, where we had finished the rest of the phases. So all 25,000 square feet are open and running. We have the Career Center. So the Missouri Career Center has a location here. The Geek Foundation has a location here. Both of them offer classes and counseling. We have the Springfield Community Gardens. We've got the Missouri Mentoring Partnership that does youth mentoring. We've got a coffee shop, community classroom. We've got a boardroom. And then obviously Drew Lewis Foundation runs their function. And we also have a partnership with the Springfield Brewing Company. They have a bike shop that they run from here. And then we also partner with American Indian Center that is really working on developing with that population. So it's amazing, all of these groups that have come together and see the potential in what it means when we collaborate and really work to serve the community around us. So that's the nutshell.
My gosh,
It could go on and on and on from there, but that's the version of the teaser I can tell you, and we'll dig into all of those different things and how we truly got here throughout different podcasts.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, when I was made aware, I went to the Sheryl Crow concert.
Oh yeah, that's part of the story too.
Yeah,
and
that's when I was first made aware of Amy and Drew, and it resonated with me because was that like 2013?
Yes, it was.
And so Jeff had been gone for 5 years, and I just knew what was ahead for you, and it broke my heart, and I hated that you had to join that club, you know. But that was my first opportunity to kind of learn about you, and just kind of stayed and heard and listened. And when I went to work for a company, they asked me to see if I could bring you on as a potential client. And I was like, I'll go have lunch with her. But when I went to have lunch with you that day, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be your friend. And so I was like, nope, I'm redirecting. This is about friendship. This is not about bringing on somebody as a client. And
I don't think you've told me that before.
Well,
I didn't realize I was
I
getting
know.
shopped.
it was just,
I'm so glad you shopped me. You are a dear friend. I'm glad to have you in my life. However it happened.
yeah, and it just didn't feel natural.
Yeah.
Right? And so then after that, I was like, I can't believe all the cool stuff you've done because, and at some point I'll explain what I tried to do, but I had been on a mission to try to bring some kind of a cancer clinic to Springfield. And I knew how hard it was to start a foundation and to have a purpose and to see that purpose grow. And I just knew I wanted to be a friend and I wanted to find a way to help. Yeah. And that's how it organically, it goes to intention, right?
Yeah. Oh, we're definitely going to do some podcasts on intention. The power of intention. I love that topic.
Yeah, I do.
Well,
too.
I appreciate that your intention changed quickly when you met me. I feel that says some good things about me versus like, oh, this slumlord in the north side. Let's just take her money.
No, good Lord, no.
Because I have no money. That's actually why. Let's be honest. You probably start talking to people like, no. She's got nothing to invest. They thought I was someone for you to shop. I was not. I was broke.
No, it was.
I bought this place. How did they think I had any money? It was my money pit.
No, it was just. I don't know. It just did not. Like I said, it felt better to just go the route of friendship and the route of discovery and community. Goes back to community
for sure
all the time.
So sorry about the sun in your eyes. We're going to look back on this very first podcast and be like, man, how did we not know that the sun sets at 4:00 out those windows?
I'm just going to slowly lean as the sun moves.
Right. We'll just, move it in. New location, point number 1 for podcast number 2. For those of you who are not on the video version of this, you have no idea what you're talking about. But poor Holly right now. No, I love the sun, so I would be like bathing in it. She does love the sun, but not
sweaty.
Right. She looks amazing. She's in this amazing dress.
It's a hot
which
flash.
I told her to wear some like yoga clothes, and this is what she shows up in. So, that's just how it goes. So, all right. Well, we are going to wrap up for today, but we just wanted you to know what we're going to be talking about, what this podcast is going to look like. Also, I was at a conference last week, and I created intention. So I was a key speaker, and we had been talking about doing this podcast. We'd actually put together stuff off and on over the last 3 years to do it. COVID is a great excuse for not doing a lot of things. But also, you want to know how many podcasts were started during COVID? Because everyone had nothing else to do but hang out in their basement and talk about stuff, right? But tons of listeners tuned in. And so it was one of those where sitting there, we had talked about the name, and lo and behold, the website was available, the trademark was available, the Facebook was available, the Instagram was available, and I thought, okay, either somehow we've come up with this amazing name, Enrichment Today, or it's a huge flop of a name, and we'll have to change it later. But right now, we're going to say it's an amazing name, and you can go to our underdeveloped website, which we have some students from Missouri State that are going to be working on that with our team. We've got Facebook, and we've got Instagram, where right now there is very little content. We're going to load it with content as we go along, as well as getting this recording out there. But it's a ton of fun to set intentions, create a couple of steps to get there, and then I always think about it like this little boat that you are holding and you put in the river, and you just have to let go, and it starts just taking its little path. So we've let it go, and now we're going to be chasing it down the river, trying to figure out what in the world we've done, but it's going to be awesome. So follow our currents, and hopefully it's not whitewater. Well, sometimes it's going to be whitewater. Yeah.
And some bends, we might get stuck in a log. Who knows? But
yeah. Man, we might end up changing our whole name from breaking crayons to whitewater rafting. Stuck on a log. Two lumps on a log. That is not how we want you to remember us today.
Lumps on the log.
But we do want to thank you for joining our rambling, joining our podcast, and following what we're about to deliver with our powerful intentions into the world. Holly, any last words?
No, that was great. I'm still stuck on lumps on a log, so.
Yeah, hopefully that is not what our hashtag becomes.
No. Well, even if it does, that's okay, right?
It'll be catchy. It'll be fun. We'll make something out of it.
People will want to know what the lumps on the logs are about.
Yeah. We're going to stick with breaking crayons. We'll be back and talk with you next time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Enrichment Today podcast. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And visit our websites enrichmenttoday.org and drewlewis.org. Until next time, remember to break some crayons.